Carter Vale stepped into his quarters and let the heavy door slide shut behind him with a tired hiss. The recycled air smelled faintly of burnt oil and copper, a scent he had grown numb to over the years. He set his tool pack down by the wall and rolled his shoulders, aching from 12 hours crouched beneath malfunctioning diggers. Another day in mines of Lara. Another day scraping by. In a world that barely remembered Earth existed, he didn't turn on the lights. The glow from the hallway still clung to the room's edges, enough for him to stumble toward his bunk and collapse face first. But before he could, something made him stop. Someone was standing in the middle of the room. Carter froze. Not a sound. Not a word. Just a small figure, barely 5 feet tall, perfectly still and calm, like she had been waiting there for hours. The faint hum of the ventilation system pressed in around the silence. Then she spoke. Humans are required to have a wife, and I've been assigned to you. Carter blinked. Once, twice, then straightened up slowly, squinting in the dim light. What? The figure took one step forward and into the light. She was not human. Her skin shimmered like polished opal, 1,000 shifting hues beneath the surface. 2 slender antennae curled gently above her head, moving ever so slightly, as if tasting the air. Her eyes were large, luminous, and impossibly blue, like oceans that had never known storms. I am Alixie of the Nari Ascension line, she said with perfect, accent-free English. Your designation has been confirmed under the Union Companion Mandate. Article 9 confirms irreversibility. She lifted a small silver box from her side and opened it. Inside lay a ceremonial scroll, its edges lined with thin gold thread. 2 names were etched across its surface, hers and his. Carter Vale. His name. Written in 6 languages, including one he didn't recognize. This is some kind of mistake, he said, voice low. I didn't sign anything. You did not need to. The pairing is determined by coalition compatibility matrices psychological. Alignment, solitary tolerance, emotional adaptability, and pheromone acceptance levels. Pheromone acceptance? He scoffed. Look, I'm not interested. I don't care what the coalition says. I just want to eat, sleep, and get back to fixing broken machines. Alixie tilted her head slightly, but her expression didn't change. Your emotional profile suggests resistance is expected. However, the discomfort usually fades. He stepped back, running a hand down his face. No, this isn't real. I don't do relationships. I barely do people. And yet you have been selected, she said softly. Based on everything the data knows, you are not unkind, only wounded. His jaw clenched. The words hit harder than he expected. You don't know me. Not yet, she said, gently closing the box. But I will. He didn't answer, just stared at her. At the scroll. At the quiet alien girl standing in his space, carrying a law he didn't agree with and a name that now tied to his. He sat down slowly on the edge of the bunk. Staring at the floor, the hum of the lights returned. So did the silence between them. She didn't move. She didn't leave. She just waited. The morning on Lara began like all others, gray light pushing through the filtered dome glass, engines groaning to life, and the dull ache of gravity pressing into Carter's bones. But something was different now. There was a presence in his quarters, one that moved without sound and spoke only when necessary. Alixie was still there, despite his refusal, despite everything he'd said. She hadn't vanished in the night like a hallucination. She was real. And she had made tea. Carter found the cup translucent green liquid that shimmered faintly, steaming slightly on the edge of the counter near his sink. Beside it, one of his data pads had been reorganized by date and voltage tolerance. His tools had been cleaned, polished. He stood there for a moment, staring. Then he picked up the tea, sniffed it cautiously, and muttered under his breath, "Flowers and ozone." Alixie sat quietly by the window, her back straight, legs folded beneath her. Her eyes tracked the distant crawler convoy returning from Shaft 12. She didn't acknowledge him until he spoke again. "I didn't ask you to do any of this." "I know," she said, calm and even. "Then why are you still here?" She turned her head slowly. "Because the law says 6 months of cultural acclimation is required before withdrawal can be initiated, and because—" "Because what?" "Because you are not as indifferent as you pretend to be." Carter set the tea down harder than necessary. "You think you've got me figured out already?" "No," she said. "I have studied you. That is different than understanding." He paced across the room, running a hand through his hair. He had no interest in understanding her, or being understood. But he couldn't stop himself from watching her out of the corner of his eye. How still she was, how present. No distractions. No judgment, just presence. Later that day, in the mines, his mind wasn't on the machines. The digger he was calibrating sparked twice before shutting down. He cursed, tore open the access panel, and got back to work, fingers blackened with dust. But something in his chest felt tight. Not pain, not anxiety. Something stranger. Like awareness. By the end of his shift, he'd nearly convinced himself to report her, file an objection, demand reassignment, anything to get control back. But when he returned to his quarters, the lights were dimmed. A small meal sat waiting on the table. And she wasn't in sight. It felt worse than when she had been sitting there. He found her outside, standing near the observation deck, her antennae twitching gently in the wind from the thermal vents. She didn't move when he approached. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "Your quarters are personal space. I sense my presence today was intrusive." He wanted to yell, or at least say something cutting. But instead, he stood beside her, staring at the stars beyond the dome. "You don't have to cook for me," he said after a moment. "I know. You don't have to clean my tools. I know." "Then why do it?" "Because it helps me understand you." Silence again. The stars above Lara never blinked. They just stared back like cold eyes, watching humans stumble through alien rules. "You always this quiet?" he asked. "No," she said, a faint smile curling at the edges of her lips. "Just with those who speak with their silence." That night, Carter couldn't sleep. She didn't hum. She didn't rearrange his tools. She simply sat across the room, still and peaceful. And somehow, that absence of movement made his chest feel heavier. The next morning, his supervisor handed him a sealed message from the colony administrator. Mandatory attendance notice. All assigned unions to be audited for compliance. Submission of emotional, spatial, and physical compatibility logs required. He crumpled the message in his fist, rage bubbling beneath the surface. He stormed back to his quarters, threw the door open, and shouted, "They want to know if we've made it." Alixie looked up from where she was meditating, her face calm. "That is a standard metric of union stability. This isn't a marriage, it's a contract. So is every human law." He slammed his hand against the wall. "You think this is normal? That I'm just going to wake up one day and start—" "What? Loving you?" Alixie stood slowly, her hands folded in front of her. "I do not expect anything from you, Carter. I only offer my presence." He looked at her then, really looked at her. For the first time, she didn't seem entirely composed. Her antennae drooped slightly. Her fingers trembled, and without another word, she picked up her scroll, her silver box, and her humming stone and left. He stood alone in the room. And for the first time in years, he felt that the quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. The quiet didn't leave. It clung to the walls of Carter's quarters like cold vapor, heavier now that she was gone. Her absence wasn't just silence, it was stillness, the kind that pressed into your lungs and made breathing feel optional. The datapad sat untouched. His boots remained muddy. The air smelled of metal and loneliness. And though he told himself again and again that this was better, this was freedom, he couldn't stop replaying her last words. I do not expect anything from you, Carter. I only offer my presence. She had left the humming stone behind. A Nari. Keepsake, small and smooth, shaped like a river stone but pulsing faintly with light when held. It responded to emotional frequencies he'd read once. It was a private thing, sacred even, and she had left it for him. 3 days passed. Work dragged like broken machinery. Shaft 7 had a recurring coolant leak again. No one could figure out why, and Carter didn't care to solve it. He kept his head down, barked orders when needed, and tried to bury himself in routines. But even the hum of fusion drills couldn't cover the growing ache in his chest. Everyone else in the colony noticed. They didn't ask questions, but they noticed that one of the engineers, Bren, leaned against the coolant pipe beside him on the 4th day and spoke without looking up. So your Nari girl's gone. Carter didn't answer. Bren scratched his beard. They're strange ones, yeah. But she kept your section running tighter than Command's ever seen. Carter tightened the bolt harder than necessary. She reorganized the air filtration logs. By airflow ratio. Cut diagnostics time in half. Still no response. I'm just saying, Bren muttered, pushing off the wall. Maybe you didn't lose a wife. Maybe you lost a crew member. That night, Carter sat in his darkened quarters, the humming stone in his palm. It was cold now. He held it tighter. Nothing. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep out when he woke from a half-conscious haze at the sound of static on his compad. A strange dread settled in his chest. The message came through choppy emergency response dispatch, Sector 7. Shaft collapse. System malfunction. Possible personnel injury. He didn't think. He ran out. By the time he reached Shaft 7, the access corridor had been sealed with an emergency pressure clamp. His badge wouldn't open it. He cursed and pried the panel off the wall, overriding the failsafe manually. The door hissed, opened, and oned. A wave of hot vapor burst out, scalding his face and arms. He ducked, but the force knocked him backward. Before he could move again, something heavy shifted above him and metal came crashing down. Pain. Bright, immediate. His shoulder crushed. He was pinned. Steam hissed from the coolant valve beside him. He couldn't reach his cum. He couldn't move his legs. The metal groaned under pressure. His lungs tightened. The heat seared his exposed skin. He screamed. But there was no one to hear it. Blackness crept in from the edges of his vision. In that fading moment, he thought of the humming stone. Of the way it glowed when she touched it. Of the way she had sat in the corner, quiet but there. He thought of how he never once said thank you. When he woke, the world was quiet, but this time not in the same way. He was lying in a med dome. Cool air washed over his skin. His arm was wrapped, his side bandaged. The room was dimly lit. Machines hummed softly. And beside him, sitting upright in a small chair, was Alixie. Her eyes were red. Her antennae twitched faintly. Not with calm calculation, but with trembling concern. You shouldn't be here, he croaked, voice raw. She leaned forward, gripping the edge of the blanket tightly. I heard what happened. I returned without clearance. They will sanction me. He stared at her. Why? Alixie didn't smile. She didn't explain. She simply reached into her tunic and pulled something out. The humming stone. It glowed softly in her palm. When I left, she whispered, it stopped responding. I thought it meant we had no resonance. But now, her voice caught, and she looked away. Now it sings. Carter blinked, tears prickling his eyes, though he'd never admit it. I thought you were gone. I was, she said, But you pulled me back." The stone glowed brighter. "This was never about the law," he whispered. Alixie's lips trembled. "I know." Then she leaned forward slowly, as if asking for permission without words, and pressed the stone gently to his chest. It pulsed once warm. Alive, and Carter felt something inside him shift, like a wound finally clotting. He reached out and covered her hand with his own. "Stay." That was all he said. And that was all she needed. The sun over Lara never rose. It simply grew brighter behind the atmosphere dome, a synthetic cycle powered by the orbital mirrors circling the gas giant. But that morning, if it could be called that, the light felt different, sharper, like something unseen had stirred. Carter Vale sat at the edge of the recovery bed, one arm bound in biogel mesh, eyes fixed on the humming stone glowing faintly on the knitstand beside him. Alixie had left it there before disappearing again, this time only to file her unauthorized return to the colony. He hadn't spoken since she left. Something in his chest still burned. Not just from the injury, but from something older. Guilt, grief, or something that felt like all of it, tangled into a knot. The door slid open without warning. Commander Narak stepped inside, human boots clicking against the sterile dome floor. Beside him stood a UCC envoy, tall, six-eyed, draped in flowing digital robes. Their presence meant only one thing. "Mr. Vale," Narak said with the kind of tone used on broken equipment and insubordinate miners. "You've been flagged for violation of Coalition Order 713, unauthorized emotional convergence following nullified Union withdrawal." Carter blinked. What the hell does that even mean? The envoy spoke this time, voice distorted but fluent. Subject Alixie of the Nari acted in contradiction to diplomatic protocol by re-entering a previously nullified Union bond without approval. Carter stood up too fast. Pain shot through his ribs. "She came back to help me. That's not a crime." "No," Narak said slowly. "But touching the humming stone after formal nullification is a binding action under Nari culture. By doing so, you accepted her claim again." Publicly, the envoy nodded. "And now the high houses of the Nari require confirmation." "Confirmation of what?" "That the union is mutual, real, and uncoerced." Carter clenched his jaw. "You mean they want a test?" The envoy's gaze didn't waver. "A proof." Hours later, Carter stood in the ceremonial chamber buried beneath the colony's admin sector, used only during first contact rituals and mandatory bond confirmations. A circular room, lit by floating orbs, marked with glowing glyphs. It was colder than he expected. Alixie entered through the far door. She wore her ceremonial tunic again. Her hair had been rebraided into the twin cords of a Nari matriarchal vow-bearer. Her antennae pulsed faintly, trembling as her eyes met his. She bowed once. "Are you prepared?" Carter swallowed. "Not even slightly." A panel opened in the floor. From it rose a crystal array, 5 spires arranged in a spiral. At the center, a seat of stone, smooth and glowing. "What is that?" he asked. Alixie didn't smile. "It's called the threshold seat. It reads intentions and reactions. One of us sits. The other must place their hand over the stone. If the bond is honest, it activates. And if it's not, then it fractures." Carter stared at it, his heart pounding louder than the machines he worked on. "Sounds a little extreme." "Nari unions are not games, Carter," she said quietly, "not tools. They are sacred exchanges, not of law, of truth." He stepped forward slowly. The stone pulsed under his palm, cool, alive, vibrating like a heartbeat just beneath the surface. Alixie sat, eyes closed. The spires rose higher, humming now. A low voice echoed from the ceiling, speaking in Old Nari. He didn't understand the words, but he felt them. A question, a demand. "Do you accept her?" Do you choose this not by law, not by force, but by will? Carter thought about the first moment he saw her, about the meals, the way she never pushed, the way she left when he broke her heart and returned when his body was broken. He thought about the humming stone and the silence that once felt like peace, and now felt like death. He closed his eyes and said the only word that mattered, yes. The stone ignited. Brilliant light surged between the spires, arcs of energy leaping between the glyphs. Alixie gasped softly, her hand rising to her chest. The envoy stepped back. Bond confirmed. Emotional synchronization achieved. Carter opened his eyes. She was still looking at him, but the light hadn't faded. Instead, it grew hotter, sharper, until the room itself began to tremble. "What's happening?" he asked. Alixie stood quickly. Her antennae curled back. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. The light from the stone fractured, splitting into violet streams that slammed against the walls and revealed something hidden behind the glyphs. An ancient seal, buried, sealed beneath layers of Nari code. Something not meant to be awakened. The envoy screamed in its own language and hit the emergency seal. "This bond has triggered a forbidden slayer. She carries more than a diplomatic rank." Carter turned to Alixie. Her hands trembled now. "Alixie," he breathed, "what aren't you telling me?" She looked at him, and this time she didn't hide her fear. "I'm not just your companion," she whispered. "I am the last carrier of the Ascension Code." "The what?" But before she could answer, the room locked down, metal walls slamming into place. The lights flickered, and the old voice from the ceiling spoke again, not in Nari, but in Earth Standard. "You have awoken the Legacy Protocol. The human has passed the threshold. The ascension begins." The walls groaned like they were remembering something ancient. The glyphs flared, pulsing with blue and violet light, and the spires that once measured love now twisted like living bones, warping into something unnatural. Carter stood frozen. In the center of the threshold chamber, the glowing seat behind him, and Alixie before him, her ceremonial robes now radiating a faint glow of their own. The envoy slammed a warning beacon on the wall. "Security override. Quarantine protocol. Zeta 9 locked down all entry points." Nothing responded. Not the doors, not the lights, not the systems. The AI had been hijacked by the chamber itself. "What the hell is happening?" Carter shouted over the rising hum. Alixie stared at the ceiling, eyes wide with a kind of grief. He didn't understand. "It's responding to your bond signature. Your resonance activated something buried beneath the ceremonial code. Something dormant. What did I trigger?" She turned to him slowly, voice barely above a whisper. "The Ascension Protocol. The last genetic bridge between Nari and human life forms." The envoy backed away in terror. That knowledge was forbidden, erased after the Fourth Convergence War. It was never meant to be found again. Carter felt his heartbeat crash like thunder in his ears. "Someone explain, now." Alixie stepped forward, reaching for him, but her hand shook. "Centuries ago, before the coalition was ever formed, there were experiments. Forbiddens. Ones. My people believed that emotional resonance could do more than bind couples. They thought it could fuse species, rewrite evolution through connection. But the results were catastrophic. The spires cracked open. Behind them, a hidden vault rose from the floor, sealed with 6 rotating rings, each inscribed with glyphs Carter didn't understand. The AI spoke again, calm and final. "Bond confirmed. Sequence Alpha. Hybrid ignition. Initiate biological memory extraction." Carter stumbled back. "Memory what?" Alixie's antennae flattened in fear. "They're going to tear through your mind. Not for information. For compatibility overlays too. Replicate the convergence genome. It's what they tried to do before. Thousands died. You brought me into this." He snapped. "I didn't know," she cried, stepping closer. "I was raised as a diplomat, but they never told me why I was born immune to genetic collapse. I thought I was just a cultural anomaly." The vault began to spin. Each ring aligned. Slowly, a low frequency shook the floor. The envoy screamed, turned, and fled. The outer doors sealed behind him. Carter looked at Alixie, breathing hard. "How do we stop it?" She looked down. "We can't," she said. Unless what?" Her luminous eyes met his. "Unless you reject the bond permanently. If you walk away right now, the resonance will fade. The protocol will break. But if you stay..." Carter took a step forward. "If I stay?" Her voice trembled. "Then you'll become part of it. The machine will embed your memory into its archive. Your mind will become the genetic key. For the next generation." Carter's hands curled into fists. "You're telling me I either abandon you or give myself up to a machine that wants to copy me into some ancient failed science experiment?" "Yes," she said. The air was electric now, thick with tension. Glowing threads of code spiraling from the vault like ghostly DNA. Carter stepped toward her again, closer, inches away. "Then answer me something first," he said, voice tight. "Did any of this matter to you? Or was it always about the mission?" Alixie's eyes shimmered. "I didn't know about the code. I didn't know about the vault. But you..." She pressed her palm to his chest gently. "You mattered the moment you let me sit beside you in silence, even when you hated it." The vault chimed. 10 seconds to hybrid sequence acceptance. Prepare for neural bonding. Carter closed his eyes. The old Carter, the one who just wanted silence, solitude, machines and routine, was screaming inside his chest. But that man had already died in Shaft 7. He reached for her hand and interlocked his fingers with hers. "Then we do it together. No more running, no more silence." The glyphs blazed. The floor erupted in a surge of light. Tendrils of energy coiled around their hands and wrists, weaving together. Symbols branded themselves into the vaults. Surface, forming 2 names, 1 human, 1 Nari. Hybrid anchor accepted. Biological bond, irreversible. Memory sync commencing. Carter's knees buckled. The world split open. He wasn't in the chamber anymore. He was inside her mind, not just hers, theirs. He saw glimpses of her as a child, staring up at stars through glass domes. He saw the ceremony where she was told she was different. He saw memories from before she was even born, genetic echoes of an ancient Nari scientist whispering in horror as a prototype hybrid collapsed into dust, and then he saw himself through her eyes, quiet, broken, alone, and yet warm, capable, full of hidden light. And he felt her love, not romantic, not political, but foundational, chosen. The sequence slowed. His body collapsed back into the chair. Her head rested on his shoulder. The glyphs dimmed. The vault sealed again, quietly. The AI spoke one last time. Hybrid protocol complete. Subject status, alive. Synchronization, stable. Genesis pathway, opened. Carter didn't move for a long time. Neither did Alixie. But when their eyes opened again together, they knew the universe would never see them as separate again. The world outside the vault was no longer the same. When the doors of the ceremonial chamber finally hissed open, Carter and Alixie stepped into a corridor bathed in sterile white light. But something beneath that light had shifted, subtly, deeply, like the air itself had begun to hum with their breath. Every wall panel flickered slightly as they passed. Systems came online before they touched them. The air filters adjusted when Carter inhaled too fast. Doors opened a moment before his hand reached the console. They were no longer just guests of the colony. They were tuned into it. A resonance. An echo of something ancient, buried and now awakened. Narok stood waiting at the far end of the corridor, eyes wide with disbelief, arms crossed. "You survived the hybrid threshold?" Carter's voice was hoarse. "Barely." Alixie didn't speak. She walked beside Carter in silence, her steps unhurried, her antennae faintly glowing with internal light. She had changed. Carter could feel it, not just emotionally, but biologically. Her presence felt warmer, more magnetic. Like her body now broadcast a signal only he could hear. Narok gestured to the Ukikiki envoy behind him. "You were supposed to be a ceremonial pair. Symbolic. This changes everything." The envoy stepped forward, its tone clipped and mechanical. "Unauthorized hybridization between human and Nari DNA carries legal consequences. Your actions triggered Forbidden's protocols. You are now considered coalition anomalies." Carter squinted. "You mean fugitives?" "No," the envoy replied. "Your property." Before Carter could answer, two elite security droids rounded the corner, tall, obsidian-plated enforcers, bearing the coalition emblem. They didn't ask questions. They didn't give warnings. They raised their pulse rifles and advanced. "Back off." Carter yelled, shielding Alixie, but the rifles never fired. Instead, they froze. Literally. The lights in their visors dimmed. Their arms dropped. Motors whined as they locked in place. One kneeled. The other shut down completely. The entire corridor lost power just for a breath, and then came back on. Carter looked down at his hands. They glowed faintly. "What the hell?" Alixie stepped forward, voice calm. "We're not just bonded, Carter. We're harmonized. The vault didn't just sync our memories, it altered our molecular rhythm. The colony's AI now reads us as a singular authority. That's why the systems respond. That's why the droids froze." Carter looked at her, stunned. "You're saying we control this colony?" "No," she said. "We are part of it. Now it sees us as a new protocol." The envoy backed away, shaking. This is a violation of 6 galactic accords." Carter turned to him, his voice low. "Then maybe it's time your accords updated." Narok finally broke his silence. "You've started something, Vale. Something you can't walk away from." "I already did that once," Carter said. "And it almost killed me." Word spread fast. Within hours, the entire colony knew. The Nari embassy demanded immediate custody of Alixie. The UCKC threatened Carter with neural separation, an experimental process to forcibly reverse the resonance. And the humans? They were split. Some were afraid, some curious, and a few, especially those who'd lost their companions to forced withdrawal, began whispering that maybe the bond system was more than just protocol. Maybe it had always been a cage. Alixie and Carter were confined to his quarters, monitored, surveilled. But that night, something strange happened. A group of humans left quiet offerings outside their door. Food packets, oil cartridges, even a vans. Handwritten note on salvaged paper. "Thank you for choosing her. For not walking away." Carter read it twice. Then again, Alixie watched him from the edge of the bunk. "They're beginning to see." He nodded slowly. "But what's coming next?" She looked down at her hands. The resonance did something more than link us. It sent a signal. A long-range burst encoded in the vault's language. It was automated, irreversible. "Who did it send to?" She didn't answer right away. Then finally, "The ones who created the original convergence program, the forgotten architects. If they still exist, they know we're alive." The air went cold. Carter stood, shoulders tight. "How long do we have?" "A few days, maybe less." A soft tone echoed through the room. "Incoming transmission. Unregistered source. Carter stepped toward the console, but the screen activated without his touch. A figure appeared obscured in static, their features unreadable. But their voice came through clear. "You've awakened what we buried," it said, "and now you belong to us." Then the screen went black. Alixie stood. "They're coming." "Who?" "She." Met his eyes. "The architects. The original creators of the hybrid code. They want us back not because we broke the law, but because we worked." Outside the dome, a silent flash lit up the sky just for a second. Like something entered orbit and didn't want to be seen. Carter stepped closer to Alixie, heartbeat steady now. "Then we don't run." She nodded once. "No, we prepare." The colony fell under a strange hush. Not silence. Lara was never truly silent. Its mining crawlers still rumbled over the cracked earth. Its diggers still carved through ancient rock. But the people had changed. They moved quieter, looked over their shoulders more often, spoke in whispers near air ducts, and walked in pairs, even on short trips to the supply depot. Something was coming. Everyone felt it. And in the heart of it all, inside Modular Unit 19A, Carter, Vale, and Alixie of the Nari sat across from one another, watching the sky. The stars were shifting. Every 6 minutes, the atmosphere dome flickered like a sensor was trying to track something it couldn't register. Something invisible. Something massive. Alixie had spent the last 12 hours interfacing with the colony's mainframe, drawing on her hybrid resonance to unlock deep control layers never meant for public access. She hadn't eaten, hadn't rested. Her antennae flickered with unreadable signals, her body coated in a faint shimmer of energy. Carter watched her carefully, his arm resting near his pulse driver, though he hadn't touched it in hours. "They're already in orbit," she said flatly. 6 ships, cloaked, non-coalition signatures. Shaped like spindles, same design as the convergence relics from the archives. Carter exhaled slowly. They came fast. "They've been listening longer than we thought." A deep, low thrum shook the ground beneath them, not seismic mechanical. Something was landing. Or worse, docking. Far outside the colony walls. The compad crackled. "Commander Narok, to all units, activate lockdown level Omega. Unknown contact approaching from Crater Delta. This is not a drill." Carter stood. "Here we go." Before they could reach the door, the locks released themselves, not triggered by Carter. Not by Alixie. By something outside. The air shimmered. And into their quarters walked a figure from the transmission. Now fully visible. It wasn't human. It wasn't NIR. It was something in between. 7 feet tall, skin like woven crystal, eyes black as obsidian but laced with gold circuits. Its voice carried like a choir inside the bones. "You have stabilized the hybrid protocol," it said. "We have come to reclaim the code." Carter stepped in front of Alixie. "She's not a code. She's a person." The figure tilted its head. "Incorrect. She is the vessel. You are the key. Together, you are the last living interface to the origin gate." Alixie's breath caught. "The gate is real?" The figure nodded. "And it requires 2. Carter clenched his fists. "We're not going with you. Resistance is inefficient. This colony will be removed to ensure acquisition." A hologram filled the room, an overhead view of the colony. Red markers indicated energy beacons had been planted in 6 sectors. They were primed to collapse the dome inward. No survivors, unless Carter and Alixie surrendered. Alixie's hand slipped into Carter's. He didn't hesitate. "Then take us to it," he said. "But only us. Leave everyone else alone." The figure nodded. Agreed. Follow. The journey to the origin gate was not through space. It was through memory. Carter and Alixie stood on a platform made of fractal light, pulled not across stars, but within themselves. Their bond, a hybrid resonance, was now a tether, guiding them to the core of something older than the UCCCs, older than Nari, older than Earth's oldest myths. And then, suddenly they arrived. A chamber of impossible size dot above them, stars, spun in tight spirals. Beneath them, a sea of data matter, glowing with every memory humanity and the Nari ever left behind. And at the center, floating like a heart of stone, was the gate, the final convergence relic, not a doorway, not a machine, but a being, a sleeping, massive construct shaped like a spiral eye closed for eons. The figure gestured to it. This is the gate. It has waited for resonance, for unforced unity, for bond born not from law, but choice. Alixie turned to Carter, her voice trembling. This is why we were paired, not for marriage, not for politics, but to awaken it. He nodded slowly. And what happens when it wakes? The gate pulsed. The answer came not in words, but in visions. Peace, war, collapse, rebirth. The hybrid code had been designed not to force a species merger, but to ensure survival when civilizations failed. It was a last hope algorithm, a genetic arc. The gate was designed to store the living DNA of every hybrid pair that passed its test. They were to become not rulers, but seeds. Once awakened, the figure said, you may step inside. Your consciousness will join the continuum. Your legacy will guide the next cycle. Alixie turned to Carter. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Do we go? He looked at her, heart full. We've always been going. Since the day you stood in my room and said, I've been assigned to you. They stepped forward. The gate opened. A brilliant light engulfed them, neither pain nor pleasure, but clarity. They felt their bodies dissolve, not die, expand. Gate pulsed once, then twice. Then shut. And in the skies above Lara, the architects vanished. No weapons fired. No colony harmed. They had what they came for. Decades passed. The law that forced humans into union was revoked, but no one protested anymore. Because something had changed in the stars. People began to bond by choice, not by mandate, by silence, by stillness, by trust earned, not demanded. And far beyond, somewhere inside the spiral of stars, two names echoed forever in the core of the origin gate. Carter Vale and Alixie of the Nari. Not just a bond, a beginning.